Not a wizard.
Just okay, so once again, welcome everyone. Let's get started right away. Just to make sure you're all in the right place, you have joined the webinar about Kati Marton's new biography on Angela Merkel, the Chancellor. Welcome everyone in the audience. Welcome to our speakers, Kati Marton and Sabine von Mering. My name is Karin Oehlenschläger. I'm a cultural program curator at the Goethe Institute, Boston. Our conversation today is co-sponsored by the Boston Book Festival and by the Center for German and European Studies at Brandeis University. And our bookstore partner is the Brookline Booksmith, where you can order the book at a 15% discount. And I will put the link in the chat later on. And about the schedule today, I will introduce both speakers, then turn off my video for their conversation, and I will monitor the chat for your questions, and will return in about half an hour or a little later, so we can get to those questions, and we have until about 1 p.m. So the timing of this conversation today couldn't be better. It happens by coincidence, admittedly, because we postponed this webinar many times, but it happens on Angela Merkel's last day in office today. And it's really the end of an era in Germany. Just as timely is the publication of Kati Marton's biography this fall. Her work on Angela Merkel is the latest of 9 books she has written. She is an award-winning NPR and ABC News correspondent. She was born in Hungary and now lives in New York City. She has spent a lot of time in Germany to research this book. She spent 4 years traveling from Dresden to Berlin and from Bonn to Templin. She talked to not only politicians, but to Merkel's childhood friends, teachers, and roommates. And she calls the book a human rather than a political portrait. Welcome, Kati Marton.
Thank you so much for having me, Karin. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. And Sabine von Mering directs, and many of you might know her already. Sabine directs the Center for German and European Studies at Brandeis University, where she also teaches German language and culture. She is currently working on the role of climate change as a challenge for the humanities, and has an upcoming publication on anti-Semitism on social media coming out next year. Welcome, Sabine. Thanks for joining us and for helping us with the technical background here. Thank you so much. Thank you again, and I'm looking forward to your conversation.
Yes, me too. Thank you, Karin. Let's get this ball rolling. I just wanted to start by congratulating you, Kati. I was very curious before I started reading the book, because and then I found out I'm in good company, because like Angela Merkel's mother, I never voted for Angela Merkel, and so I was hesitant to read a book that, you know, I anticipated would be sort of a celebratory account, and I have to say you succeeded in making me respect her much more than I did before. I really appreciated your attempt to humanize her, but also to look behind the scenes of her work and show her as the workaholic that she is, which I found very, very sympathetic. And I also appreciated that you were able to do her justice without falling into, you know, the trap of just praising her abundantly. You know, you have a respectful, admiring at times distance also, and you do not overlook what needs to be critiqued, and I think you've done that in a beautiful way that, you know, as a woman author writing about the most powerful woman in the world, I really respect also as a feminist practice, I have to say, very, very much. So I thought it would be it would be fun for our audience to hear, because something that intrigued me at the beginning was that you actually drew some parallels between yourself and her, which I think may have been one of the reasons why you were so interested in writing this book. And I thought people may want to know a little bit more about you before we delve into Angela Merkel more, who is, of course, known to us through the media. So would you mind talking a little bit about yourself first?
Well, I'd rather talk about Merkel, but thank you for what you said, because you hit it right. You hit the nail on the head. This is by no means a hagiography. It's a critical look at a leader who has now entered history. She's post-politics now. And as a matter of fact, Sabine, I think that she's been post-politics for a long time. She is formally a member of the Christian Democratic Party Union, but she is as much a socialist as she is a Christian Democrat. She takes issues that work regardless of their party affiliation. So I think she is. I'm sorry you never voted for her, but you should have, because she did so much for women, for climate, for equality of genders, in embracing ultimately marriage equality, and for putting Germany on the right side of history for a change, with her generous acceptance of 1 million, mostly Middle Eastern migrants in 2015, at a time when most members of the European Union were putting up walls and barbed wire to keep them out. So she has transformed Germany, but she has done this so quietly, because it practices what I refer to as an ego-free politics. That is to say that it's not about look at me, give me credit. On the contrary, she gets things done by not taking credit for what she's getting done, because she is so smart. She is by any measure brilliant, that she understands that once you start making it about you, which is what demagogues do and authoritarians, of which she had to deal with many, do, you become a target yourself. So she won over Germans, and let's not forget, 4 times elected chancellor. I mean, it's, okay, you take a chance on someone, you elect them once, which generally happens for women candidates, and that's it. But 4 times, so she had to do her politics very quietly. She's a stealth politician. She gets things done by working sideways, not frontally. And it's something that we should all study, not just politicians who I hope will read this book as a sort of manual on how to gain and hold on to power. It's all there in that book. And she figured this out herself, this triple outsider. Sabine, don't forget, she's from the East, she's a scientist, and she's a woman in a male political culture. So, okay, those are the positives about her. We can get to the negatives, but the positives loom so large in a landscape of politicians who are self-serving and enrich themselves while in office, and then have trouble letting go. I think in her leave taking, which we are now observing, she has given a final lesson in how democracy should work, which is to say, my day is done, I've done my best, it's someone else's turn. I wish to God that we could have such politicians who exit as gracefully as she has. And there are 2 sources for Merkel's politics and for her achievements. One is her very firm roots in the Lutheran faith. She is the daughter of a pastor. My original idea was to title this book the pastor's daughter. But then I rethought that she's so much more than that. And she really did become the chancellor, not only of Europe, but of the world in a way, when there was no leadership in the West. So she's more than, and also I too, Sabine, am a feminist, so I didn't want to just make her somebody's daughter. So I chose the chancellor as the more fitting title. But in fact, her father, the Lutheran pastor, a tough guy, an austere guy, she never won his full support or admiration. She never stopped trying, had a tremendous influence on her subsequent life and career, and she imbibed from him the need to serve and this responsibility to look after the less fortunate. I observe this. I start the book in a scene in a small chapel where she's interacting, and I happen to be there, and I watched her interact with handicapped people as if it were the most normal everyday affair. And why is she that comfortable in that setting, both in the church setting and in the handicapped population setting? It's because that's how she grew up. She was raised in the Waldhaus in Templin in the Brandenburg province, beautiful province of lakes and forests, where she still feels most at home and where she will be spending much more time now that she's able. And part of the parish was consisted of this population of handicapped children, and those were her playmates. Those were her friends growing up. So that was so the influence of the father and of Lutheranism and the need to serve was one thing. And then the other, of course, was 35 years spent in a country that she referred to as a lager, as a camp, because indeed East Germany was a prison state. It was the most heavily surveilled population in East Germans were more surveilled than people living under the Third Reich. So that is where she learned to be suspicious, to trust no one, because as I describe in the book, it turned out that a close friend of hers, her lab partner, was informing on her. So that was a big blow to her ability to trust, and she trusts very few people, and as a result, there have been no tell-all books about her 16 years. She doesn't give interviews. She didn't give me any formal interviews, but what she allowed me to do, which in a way was more important, she allowed me to spend time in the chancellery and to penetrate her inner circle. And to spend and to observe her, and I tried to write as vivid an account of how she does what she does, which, I'm a reporter, as you mentioned, by training, so that was very helpful, because I know how to get people to talk. Yes,
yeah. I think that was a feat of yours. Before we move on, I just wanted to say, since you mentioned marriage equality, she actually voted against marriage equality.
I know.
She made it possible
exactly
for it to
you
come
have
back. But we should just make sure that people,
but this is how this is how she works. She enables things. She enables people to make moral decisions without hammering them. She never gave a speech about women's rights, women's equality. And yet,
and that was something you mentioned frequently in your book, that she continues to be criticized for not having done more for women in her 16 years, right?
It's not a fair criticism, because she's not, she's a more subtle, if she would have, she often says, Sabine, you know this, that I am Chancellor of all Germans. I am not the Chancellor from the East. And by the way, East Germans make the same criticism. How come you didn't talk more about us? And there, I think there's something to the criticism, because now in the last weeks, months, and even the last 2 years of her chancellorship, she has begun to realize that she should have acknowledged East Germans and their suffering, and the fact that, okay, we threw a lot of money at them to build back a dysfunctional state, but we should have acknowledged what they went through more. But she didn't want to be, pigeonholed as either a woman or a Lutheran or an East German or anything else. She was fighting so many barriers as a woman, as a scientist, as an Odyssey, that she wanted to underplay those influences. And she didn't think that speeches, she's not a good speaker, as you know, but she doesn't believe that getting crowds excited with rhetoric on any of these subjects would serve her ability to be the chancellor of all Germans. But on marriage equality, I mean, she was the one who brought the first gay man into her cabinet, Guido Westerwelle, to whom she was very close. And this, I mean, she's very subtle. She made a speech about his beautiful love story with his husband and praised them for it.
Yeah,
and
I think that's one powerful place in your book when you describe her at his funeral.
Oh, yeah. She wept at that. So she's not your conventional politician who jumps on a soapbox and says, do this, do that, She's the anti-demagogue.
I think that comes out pretty clearly. You also talk a lot about, and that was sort of a nice tension in the book, that her resistance to be revealed in any way. So the very project that you undertook was sort of, something that it was almost like a cat and mouse game where she was making it really difficult for you to.
I mean, it wasn't personal. She didn't want this or any other book of any subtlety. It's okay to write about, what goes on in the Bundestag or her interactions with German politicians on the surface, but not what motivates her, who she is, her and how she got, this astonishing journey from Templin to the center of the world.
Yeah, I think one other part that I found really fascinating was, and that sort of epitomizes her style, was how you described the development in the Ukraine crisis.
Yes,
and you even have the image there of her flying around and the unbelievable hours that she spent. That was really interesting to read about how, and I think at the end you also say that you're nervous that this kind of tenacity and commitment to just sit until something moves and work through the night, and again and again you describe her as being indefatigable, that she just keeps going and she's flying around, and the next morning she's there, and she's not just there, she's there having read all the dossiers in detail. And so I think you are, that's what I meant by letting us look behind the scenes, that you sort of show, we read in the paper or hear on the radio what the results of these consultations were, but we don't understand how someone like Merkel actually sits for hours with someone like Putin to come up with a peace agreement, or at least a truce in Ukraine. And that is, of course, a place where we're very nervous right now, right? So
with
I
good
think
reason. We should be. And in a way, I don't think it's a coincidence that the week that she leaves, and in the weeks running up to it, Putin is testing the West, because who in the West is going to put in the time and the effort and the brilliant strategic thinking, because she has a photographic memory, and therefore Putin could not get past that wall of her knowledge base on what he was doing overnight. She said she knew every tree in the Donbass region, and that is in play now. And I am sincerely concerned as to whether the West will muster the stubborn resistance that she did, because Barack Obama handed off the leadership of the West to Angela Merkel during the first invasion. I mean, I hope it's, I don't want to call it the first invasion, because I don't want there to be a second invasion of Ukraine, which would be just a catastrophe for not only for Europe, but for the world. But who in her place is going to stay at that table and hold him to account? She said of that marathon negotiation, which resulted in the Minsk treaties 1 and 2, that sometimes the only way she knew what time of day it was whether a bread and jam were being served or a roast. Mm-hmm. That is the level of her focus. Mm-hmm. Because I attribute that partly to her training in science, is that she will she knows how to drill deep and how to blot out all other distractions. I mean, I describe how others were falling asleep, the French foreign minister, Putin's henchmen, they were all dropping off, and Merkel and Putin, because they have a sort of a grudging respect for each other. It's like a long dysfunctional marriage. They really understand each other. They were both products of the same foundation, totalitarianism, and they came out obviously on opposite sides of that, because for Putin, the greatest tragedy of the 20th century is the collapse of the Soviet Empire, and that is what he is trying to reverse correct even now in Ukraine. And for Merkel, the collapse of the Soviet Empire was the beginning of her second life, her liberation, mm-hmm. and her entry into politics. She had chosen science as an East German because science is more is tougher to manipulate and control, because it's based on hard fact.
Well, and also it gave her a chance to actually work, right?
Yes. Yes, because
she wouldn't have had a chance, I think, if she had gone into political science.
No. And I never answered your question about, I mean, it's presumptuous of me to in any way compare myself to this brilliant and powerful leader, but I did have an East Bloc childhood, and my parents were political prisoners who I did not see for a couple of years as a little kid. This was in Budapest, Cold War Budapest. They were journalists. And I did send to the Chancellor my memoir of that childhood called Enemies of the People. And I was assured by her aides that she had indeed read it. So maybe, she didn't, she wasn't as cold or dismissive of me as she might have been of just another American writer. And in addition to that, I think it gave me a sensitivity to why she is the way she is, because mm-hmm. I was a little kid when we escaped from Hungary, but and she was 35, but I was raised by two people who were absolutely scorched by that experience of living in a lager. And so of course I too am a product of that, and I understand her her inability to open up in public, mm-hmm. and I don't think that Germans wanted her to open up in public, because she delivered. Germany became a prosperous and and in many ways models world citizen, I would say, under her.
Well,
other than the
yeah.
Bildzeitung.
I think that's really an astute observation with regards to her ability to find her way. And I think what you do in the book really well is that you actually explain her weaknesses through her strengths, right? You actually show that her rationality,
yes,
and her scientific approach to problems, her meticulousness, and her made her in some ways unable to understand why others would see things differently.
yes.
Right?
Well, you put it much better than I would. And also she despises demagogues, and she despises, blowhard men. She was generally the only woman in the room, even as a scientist. And so she had and certainly when she was starting out in Bonn as a young, very young minister, she studied men. She has a physical aversion to men who just blow hot air. And she knows how to deal with them. And she also is unsentimental in cutting their legs off, as she did with her number one mentor, Chancellor Helmut Kohl, when he was caught in a scandal, when no one else in the CDU had the courage to say, Dankeschön, Helmut, auf Wiedersehen. She did.
Right.
Because
very publicly.
Oh my God, without any warning, she wrote this opinion piece in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, which basically said, the king is dead, long live the queen, namely herself, thereby ending Kohl's spectacular run and clearing the path for herself. But she did this a number of times to former mentors, not out of malicious intent, but because she's hard-nosed, she can be ruthless. These are not qualities that we generally associate with ladies. And she is first and foremost a tough-minded, brilliant politician, fiercely ambitious, who has changed the world's image of what a woman leader looks, sounds, and leads like, and has put to rest, I think, permanently, a woman's ability to lead through good times or bad. She didn't have that many good times, because in 16 years, it was one crisis after the next. The financial meltdown, the Fukushima nuclear catastrophe, which led to her pulling Germany out of nuclear power. Of course, the migration crisis, and of course 4 years of Donald Trump, which is
not something you can blame her for. I do want to get to some of the critiques, though, because I think that's what makes your book so valuable, is that you are able to lay that out without taking her down. And I think one, for example, stood out to me was when you described what happened at the beginning of the AfD and how Merkel's approach to the situation in 2015,
yes,
and the Syrian war and the refugees showed precisely how the strengths that she normally had didn't work.
Right.
Because she wasn't able to actually make everyone understand what she did, right?
Yes, well put. She often underestimates the role that the irrational plays in human affairs, because she is so hyper rational. So she thinks that what's obvious to her will be obvious to everybody. and she didn't sufficiently consult her EU partners at the outset of her generous Wir schaffen das policy, and then was hugely disappointed when they didn't come to her rescue and open up their borders, with the exception of Sweden for a while and Austria for a while. But mostly they were busy fanning the flames of populism in their own countries as a more saleable political message. I mean, Viktor Orban, of course, was the worst, but even the British Prime Minister referred to the migrants as a swarm, which she treated them as humans. She treated them as the pastor's daughter. And Germany really, for the most part, has followed her lead on this, and it is no longer a front burner issue. There are many other issues. Of course, we haven't even touched on her last 2 years as the COVID manager, which is not how she expected to end her time in the chancellery. What she announced in her, typically she gives one speech a year to the nation. With the backdrop of the Reichstag, that dramatic backdrop, and that is her New Year's Eve speech, which is usually just fluffy stuff. And at the beginning of 2020, she devoted that speech to climate and how climate change was real and dramatic, and that she would now turn to that. And then 6 weeks later came COVID, and she never did. So, but her inability to connect personally with people, which you mentioned, is somewhat responsible for the rise of the Alternative für Deutschland, which, by the way, is not a growing movement. They've lost support, thank God, but they are in the Bundestag. But I'm sure you've been watching her final military ceremony and her
Hagen.
Yeah, I mean that was a beautiful and unexpected, not unexpected by me, because I know that Angela Merkel is not who we think she is. She is not this, altogether serious, straight-laced person. She's somebody who really likes to have a good time and has a killer sense of humor and does wonderful imitations of Putin to amuse her staff and to give herself relief from the tension of dealing with. No one's ever seen her do a Donald Trump imitation, but
but you have the picture in the book where she stared him down, which became a famous meme all around the world.
I love that. He tried every which way to shake her self-confidence. When he threw those candies at her at a G8 meeting, old candy that he fished out of his pocket, probably full of lint, that he tossed at her and said, "Don't say I never gave you anything, Angela." And everybody, all the other leaders of the West were just aghast. Not Merkel. She never let on that she even noticed, which is, of course, what drives a bully crazy if you don't get a reaction. But that's her kind of superpower in dealing with, be it Putin, who unleashed his dog, knowing that she is afraid of dogs, having been bitten. And again, she that discipline that she learned, as a young woman in trying to keep the Stasi off, trying not to call attention to herself.
I think, as a fellow Lutheran pastor's daughter myself, I was interested in this, that was also something that ran through your book as a red thread. And of course, and that is for me the explanation why I never voted for her. And I would actually see many of the crises that she was dealing with as also partly of her making. and that you presented to me a very American look of her that for me as a German American, I appreciated being able to understand why Americans love her so much.
Not only Americans.
No, of course,
the world.
But I just wanted to say that from the Lutheran pastor's perspective,
yes,
there are many of the crises that you describe, where you sort of describe her handling and managing and or not. I think the critique, some people would also say, well, she also let these crises fester or made, didn't prevent them in some cases.
True in some, yes, true with the AfD, but and
I also think the climate crisis, I mean, since that is my topic, that as a scientist, she should have made that a top priority from the beginning and not in 2020.
Yeah, I don't disagree, but let me just say that Merkel is a realist who deals with the world as it is, not as she would wish it to be. She is a determined optimist,
right?
Not a Kissingerian real politician, although they're good friends.
Right.
But
yeah, I think
is she because her core humanism, we go back to the Lutheran origins. Are when she told Kissinger about her refugee policy, for example, because I interviewed Kissinger for this, he said to her, Angela, to allow a single refugee into the country is a humanitarian act. 1 million is to allow the destruction of Germany. Well, that did not come to pass. Germany has now provided a template for the rest of the world, if only it would take that template on how to integrate migrants, because this is the crisis that will not go away. And to return to climate, we're about to be faced by climate refugees, climate migrants. So the world has to, I hope, study how she managed that. Yeah. And she is...
Well, I think the Syrian refugees were already climate refugees, and that is precisely what I meant. That there is a climate problem in the back of the Syrian crisis.
Definitely.
That could have been anticipated by someone who was more of a leader than a follower in many ways. But Karin is here. I assume we are out of time for...
we have another 15 minutes, and I thought we should maybe get to some questions.
Some of the questions, yes.
Yeah.
Although I love Sabine's point of view, and we could go on.
It's a book that everyone should read. Absolutely, I'm really grateful I got a chance.
Thank you so much. And coming from someone who started off as not a natural fan of the Chancellor.
Well, I'm not a natural fan, and I'm still not a fan of hers, but I think I understand her so much.
Oh, good. That's all. That's all I want, Sabine. Just understand her because you look around the world and who are the leaders now?
Exactly.
We have a whole bunch of really dangerous people, and
it's a tough act to follow, no question about it.
Yeah, I think we will miss her more than even you will miss her more than we now realize, because she made it look easy by not calling attention to look at what I've done.
Yeah, it'll be
focusing on. Okay. Anyway,
so I think you touched on two questions that Eva Zierlein is asking in the chat. What do East Germans think of the very positive picture? I think you mentioned a little bit about that, and also the role of Helmut Kohl in her. Maybe you can talk about how her ability to hold on to and consolidate power. The power issue there. This is for Kohl.
Okay, if there are questions, if you have questions there that we really haven't dealt with, because I think I probably held forth on her ability to be ruthless when big powerful men disappoint her, including her mentors along the way. And that
maybe you can talk a little bit about Macron and her, because that was something, someone brought that up in the chat, and I think that is, you know, because is Macron her successor in terms of a leader of Europe? I mean, what do you think?
Macron has a whole lot more power than she does, because the German Chancellor is not as you know, it's not a powerful executive the way the French Président de la République is, because we, the United States, of course, helped to craft the German Constitution, and we didn't want a strong executive. So Merkel rules more by stature and more in the realm of foreign policy than domestic policy. And Macron has great powers, but he's also much more of a nationalist. And the French culture and psyche is so different from the German. French celebrate their military might. Germans obviously do not.
They invest in nuclear power.
Yes, and Macron would like nothing more than for France to be the leader of Europe. But it really, because Germany is the economic leader, and now the moral leader too, thanks to what the retiring chancellor achieved. I don't think there's a chance of that, but nor does he have a strong, certainly no strong partner in London, because Brexit has assured. By the way, that was something that Merkel was crushed by, Brexit, because for her the European Union that is her vision. When people say what is her vision, well, her vision is a strong European Union. Anyway, I digress from the Macron relationship has been complicated, and I try to explain that, because he was she once said to him, you like to blow things up, and I have to clean up after you. So, you know, he's another macho guy who is more about himself than she would like. But of course, he's spectacularly intelligent, very attractive, and she was very happy after that non-entity François Hollande, and after the very aged Jacques Chirac, she finally had a dynamic, young, charismatic leader of France to deal with. So, and she likes to deal with intelligent people, lively exchanges. So she enjoyed her interaction with Macron, and they did in the end forge a powerful European Union rescue package that was a result of COVID. And there she learned her lesson from her not so successful Eurozone meltdown policies, where she was all about austerity and not enough about human suffering. And I deal with that at some length in the book, the Eurozone crisis. Does that answer the Macron question? And Helmut Kohl and her ability to be ruthless when necessary.
Yeah, I think there's one question. I don't know if that's our last question, Karin, about Alex asked the question, do you see the new chancellor as a hope for continuity or a break from the Merkel era?
Most definitely continuity. He ran on a Merkel platform and even adopted the famous hand posture for which there's an emoji. Again, this is post-politics. He's not all in with the Social Democrats. We have to discard, I think, these antiquated notions of party. I know you're a Social Democrat, and
Nope.
no. Oh, okay.
I'm a Green.
You're green. Okay. Well, the Greens, yeah, the Greens are going to have a big role, and the head of the foreign ministry is a Green. But I think it's going to be a very moderate Merkelian, so continuity, because it's successful. And by the way, we're still in a global pandemic.
Right.
You know, I was just in Berlin.
Yeah. What would you say, by the way, because you, I think very powerfully describe how she rallied her country almost like a family at the beginning, but why are we in such a mess at this end point? Why has Germany under her leadership not been able to pull through in a more successful way?
Well, who has? I mean, you know, nobody knows very much about this is our first global pandemic of this magnitude in 100 years. And, you know, there are a lot of social media has played a terrible role, in my opinion, in undermining science. Mm-hmm. And there are politicians who recklessly support that anti-science, anti-vax movement, which basically keeps this pandemic going. The people who are getting sick are not the people who've been vaccinated. And this has been very frustrating for Merkel, who is a creature of science.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that is another example then of what you described in her earlier dilemmas, that her rationality kind of, this was maybe a time when something else was needed than rationality. Yeah,
there's also the East German factor, that most of the anti-vax movement is in the East, mm-hmm. and they listen to a lot of Russian spurred disinformation. Mm-hmm. You know, Putin has exploited the possibility of disinformation very skillfully. You know, it's no longer about a showdown between, you know, two nuclear powers, which was my childhood, the Cold War. It's now about really a confrontation between those who control social media and Putin, who likes nothing more than to disrupt, has had a big impact on the East German population in keeping this ferment going. That's all in his interest. And
well, you also say that what characterizes Merkel is that she is strongest in person, that she's someone who really gets into the room with people and sits with them and talks with them and gets to know them and learns everything about them. That wasn't possible in the pandemic. I wonder whether that's part of the problem as well.
No, I know she misses that, because her brand of diplomacy is one human at a time, really, and she's very impressive in small groups, much more impressive in small groups around a table than at a podium, for example.
Hanno Mussen brings something up that I also really liked in your book, and that is you repeatedly talk about Merkel's fascination with China and the innovation there, and you know, she was really inspired by what she learned from her travels to China. And he asks the question here, how could it happen that the digital infrastructure is so rotten in Germany? Has not the Grand Coalition be an alliance for the elderly instead of a leadership for the future?
Mm-hmm. You know, digitization, particularly in the East, is something that she was getting around to really pushing for in the last 2 years. Appointed Eva Christensen, one of her 3 closest aides, to be charged with that. And that too has now slipped from the front to the back. I hope not for long. She does believe that the West can learn from China, but at the same time, because she's such a cool, rational thinker, she sees the difference between the Chinese totalitarian model and the former Soviet totalitarian model, because the Chinese have lifted millions from poverty, which of course Moscow did not do. So, and she also doesn't believe in attacking people. She doesn't believe in frontal attacks. So she would never criticize Xi Jinping to the media. Or indeed, she didn't criticize Trump or Erdogan or Putin either. She just doesn't believe in that that's useful. So, but her aides assure me that behind closed doors, she does tell him that what you're doing in Hong Kong or with the Uyghurs is going to make it very difficult for us to continue like this. But she's also Chancellor of Germany, or was, and Germany is a trading nation, a car producing nation, and is very dependent on the Chinese market. And she would never want to test Germany's ability to sail through a time of economic hardship. Mm-hmm. Because she is such a student of German history. She knows what Germans are capable of in economically hard times.
So as someone who knows her so well now, if you had your pick, what would you want her to do next?
Oh, well, I would urge her to take a long and leisurely break, do a lot of hiking in those woods she loves in Brandenburg. And I think that she will, she's free for the first time in her life, 35 years under Stasi, 16 years as chancellor, where she was always surrounded and where her daily schedule was widely distributed. So this is going to be a new experience for her. And I think that with her scientists, mindset, she will observe her own reactions to that, to all this sudden freedom, and observe whether she misses being in the arena. And if she does, she will have ample opportunities to rejoin the powerful, the table of the powerful. I would hope on climate. Mm-hmm. And I think that's unfinished business for her. And I think I'm told that she will also spend time on women's empowerment in places like Africa, where they're not anywhere near where they should be. So, but first, let's give her a break. But she will not be traumatized by leaving the seat of power, because she never left her small apartment, rent-controlled apartment, in the heart of the former East Berlin, and she continued to live like a normal person, doing her own groceries, cooking. So this will, this is not a woman who wrapped herself in the cloak of wealth and power and fame the way pretty much every other male, because they're all men, leader has done. Right. So, 16 years without a breath of scandal. Right. Pretty, if she had done nothing else, that would
even when they tapped her private phone, they were bored.
Yes. Well, first of all, she's way too smart to ever say anything into a cell phone. I mean, she grew up in the Stasi state. I mean, what was Obama thinking? They got nothing.
Well, I heard that she liked traveling in the United States, so she might come and teach at a university here.
Yes, yeah, those would be, beautiful ways for her to, because she's young relatively, and she's
right. And she will easily get bored given the kinds of schedules that she's used to.
But I think she has to reach that point where she's bored before she, and we know one thing about Merkel, she will not be rushed. Mm-hmm. She always takes her time. I described that in some detail, that she, she always shocked those offering her big jobs by saying, let me think about it. She never said, oh, yeah. I think we're out of
Well,
time.
yeah, one last quick thing will there be a German translation of the book? Will it come out in Germany? Or?
I hope so. I hope so, because it's different from every other book about her, because it is a much more human portrait. But, you know, maybe there's a sense among, you know, the German political class that, you know, who is this woman, Kati Marton in New York, writing us, you know, telling us who our chancellor is. We know everything there is to know about her. So I think there's a little bit of skepticism. Okay. It has been translated into 15 languages: Russian, Chinese, all the other Europeans.
Not German?
Not German so far. So
maybe because many people are reading it in English.
I think that's partly true. Yeah, it was I was in Berlin last week, 10 days ago, and it was very warmly received. I gave some presentation there, and yeah, people do seem to be reading it. I would, of course, love it if it were translated. I did present it. I went to the Chancellery and presented the Chancellor with the book through Eva Christensen's intervention. So I hope she's reading it. And I'll just say this. This sounds very self-congratulatory, but you know, my book deals so much with the importance of her East German background. And I noticed that in her last few remarks, she's been really speaking about that almost for the first time. She got quite upset when her East German history was referred to as ballast. She said, my East German history is more than that. It was a lived life. And so maybe that is also something she could do that would be good for Germany and good for her and good for everyone if she spent some more time with her fellow East German. Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you both very much. yeah, we're kind of already over the time, but thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience in the beginning with the technical issues, but it was an enlightening conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you, Karin, and thank you, Sabine.
Very nice meeting you.
Very nice to have met you, and your questions were so thoughtful and even provocative. It's really fun talking to someone who is.
I figured I'm dealing with a pro. I can handle it.
I don't know about that.
Next time in person, hopefully, maybe at the Goethe Institute in Boston.
I would love that. So thank you all for hosting me. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.